This afternoon, the Rebbe told us and began the Farbrengen that this Shabbos is following last Shabbos, which last Shabbos was Gimel Tammuz, 3 days in the month of Tammuz. And as we know, Gimel Tammuz was the Aschalta de Geula, the beginning of the redemption, release of the Friedeke Rebbe from prison. As we know that when the Friedeke Rebbe was in prison, he was arrested on Tes Vav Siv, 15 days in the month of Siv. And for the first 17 days, he was kept in a prison, in a fortress. And afterwards, they decided that they will send the Friedeke Rebbe away to a very far city called Kostroma. And on Gimel Tammuz, that is when the Rebbe left Leningrad towards Kostroma. And then it was Yud Beis Tammuz, that is when he got the notification that he's released totally. In fact, the way the story goes, Yud Beis Tammuz was some sort of a legal holiday then. So that's why it was impossible to process the complete release on Yud Beis Tammuz. So that's why it was extended another day. Actually, he was released on Yud Gimel Tammuz. In fact, it's mentioned somewhere in the Siches, the Rebbe mentions it in the Siches, that the Friedeke Rebbe once related, it was at a Farbrengen of Yud Beis Tammuz, obviously, that it was during one of the times when they called him for one of his investigations. The Friedeke Rebbe was sitting on the other side of the desk, being investigated, and his file was on the desk. So he noticed what his decree was. But first, they had a decree, Chas v'Shalom, to kill him. That was their intention. And he saw a line crossed over there. Then they wanted to send him to Kostroma for life. And he saw a line crossed over that as well. And the next thing which he saw, which was the item number 3, that he's being sent, he was reading this like from the other side of the desk. He was trying to read whatever was on the file about him. But they intended to send him to Kostroma for 10 years. It was Chazdei Hashem that turned out to be for a period of 10 days. And as he left Leningrad on Gimel Tammuz, and on Yud Beis Tammuz, 9 days later, he was notified that he's being released from prison completely. So this Shabbos follows last Shabbos, which was Gimel Tammuz. And Gimel Tammuz, that is like the first step of the Geula of Yud Beis Tammuz. The Aschalta, the beginning of the Geula, really began on Gimel Tammuz. In other words, this is already making it easy. As Rebbe mentioned last week, initially when it happened, Chassidim didn't know what type of a reaction to take. Does it mean it's going to be better? Is it a change to the better, or is it a change to the worse? But after we realize the whole chain of events, now looking back, we see that Gimel Tammuz was definitely a turn to better. Now we are a Shabbos after Gimel Tammuz, which means that an entire week has passed since Gimel Tammuz. What's the pshat? A week? A week is a complete cycle. A Sunday, a Monday, a Tuesday, straight through the entire week. The whole inyan of Shabbos is that Shabbos gives bracha to the following week, as well that Shabbos elevates everything that happened in the past week. This is the whole inyan of Shabbos. Vayichulu hashamayim va'aretz. Vayichulu chassidus taiches maloshin kiloyon. It's a maloshin of uplifting, that it lifts up everything that has transpired during the week. Memela. During this week, we had a chance in every single day of the week to utilize the inyan of Gimel Tammuz. Now, this is this Shabbos which uplifts this week. Here the Rebbe brought a Ramban. The Ramban explains, we say every week, we say every day, which we begin again every week, we say the Yom, Yom Rishon, Yom Sheni, and so forth. Every day by Shachis we say the Yom. So the Rambam brings out that what pshat we say on a Sunday, Yom Rishon. When we say Yom Rishon on a Sunday, being that this Sunday comes after the Shabbos, So it's like a new brios beginning of this week. It's like a new creation. And Mamela, this Sunday is like called the first day. And Mamela, Monday is the second day. So every week is a special week. Every week we get a week which comes as a result to a Shabbos, following a Shabbos, and this is a kind of a new bria, kind of a new creation, naturally in a small scale, which is happening every week again. So now we just went through such a week, which is a complete cycle since Gimel Tammuz. Bichlal, the Rebbe continues, as the Frierdiker Rebbe himself writes, regarding the inyan of Geula of Yud Beis Tammuz, that this is something which does not have a shaykhus only to him personal. Famous letter of the Frierdiker Rebbe, Loi oisi bilvad go'al HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The inyan of Geula is not something which is to him only, but koilan shel b'shem Yisrael yichuna. Anyone that can only be identified as a Yid, to him has a shaykhus the inyan of Yud Beis Tammuz. And the Rebbe always stresses yichuna. The Rebbe does not use the expression yikore or nikra. Yechune is Maloshen Kinui, kind of a nickname. In other words, to a person that to him the whole concept of Yiddishkeit is to him only a nickname. It's a secondary name. It's not his main inyan. And still, even to such a Yid, the inyan of Yud Beis Tammuz has a shaykhus. Especially when we're talking about a person whose arrest was not because of any personal matter, and it's not a private inyan. Why was the Rebbe arrested? The Rebbe was arrested because he was strengthening and upkeeping Yiddishkeit at that time in Russia, which was bound with Mesiras Nefesh. So Mamela, it has to affect each and every one of us as well, especially when we're talking about a Geula, which is the Geula of a Tzaddik, a Geula of a Nasi. Any inyan of Geula is a great thing. Even a Geula of a private person is something which is very special. Allah has kama v'kama when we're talking about a Geula of a Nasi. As Rashi tells us in this week's Sedre, Ha-Nasi hu ha-koil. That Nasi is equivalent to Gans of Klal Yisrael. So it's the inyan of Geula that happened to a Nasi. And it's a Geula which the Nasi himself writes that this has a shaykhus to every Yid. So from all of these things together we can understand how this has to have an effect on each and every one of us. What is the v'hachai yiten el liba, is the Rebbe uses the expression, the hira, which we can have from all of this. So the Rebbe continues, what is the inyan of Geula? The Taj Geula. Geula is the opposite of Golus. Something is in Golus. When someone is in Golus it's a mishenish. There's a confusion. Geula is when one has something clear and concrete and has a bright understanding of the matter. That's called the inyan of Geula. So in other words, Geula is a revelation of emes. When there is emes, there is Geula. When there's a tishtush, a mix-up, and a confusion, that is the inyan of Geula. So what is really the inyan of Geula? The inyan of Geula is to reveal the emes. Talking in Avodah and Ruchnius, when people realize how ein oid milvadoi, there's nobody other than the Rebishter, and everything that is created in this world is created only through the Rebishter, and that the Rebishter is b'koiche v'yecholta, he's the one that controls everything, and he's the one that gives life into everything, and he's the one that upkeeps everything. This is the inyan of Geula in Ruchnius. Why? Because Geula means a revelation of emes, and when a Yid realizes the emes, the ein oid milvadoi, that there is nobody other than HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and that everything is getlichkeit, this is in Ruchni, is the inyan of Geula. Especially now that we're discussing this on a Shabbos, and we're this mekasha to last week's Shabbos. The inyan of Shabbos has also a special shaykhus to emes, because there's the famous Yerushalmi that even an Am HaOretz does not lie on Shabbos. And this is negay even lahalacha. It's a question, it was a question of in whom we have trust as far as saying that the fruit was treated properly, that fruit, truma and meiser and everything was taken off it. So the Yerushalmi tells us that an Am HaOretz did not have trust. He did not believe him if he would say that this fruit is gemeiser or truma and so forth. However, Shabbos Shabbos is different. Why? Because even an Amaretz would not lie on Shabbos. What's the Taich Amaretz? The Rebbe says it's an expression, but in the expression we have the definition of the person. It's the opposite of a Talmud Chacham. Brings out the idea that he's tied to what is his whole Metzias. His whole Metzias is Eretz. Eretz is Gashmius, even much more than that. Arzius, Chumrius. In other words, a person whose whole involvement, his whole Metzias is Gashmius and Chumrius. And what do we say? It comes on Shabbos. Even such a person, we also have trust to him. So what does this stress? This brings out how in Shabbos reveals the inyan of emes. Allah has come of the Kama when we're talking on a Shabbos, and we are tying this Shabbos together with Giyula, which stresses yet more the inyan of emes. Both inyan of emes, sort of a chayit and a liboy, has to be in what? In stressing these inyanim, the concept of Giyula, the revelation of emes, how a Yid should realize that everything and anything is ein oid milvadoy, and that the entire world is full of Getlachkeit and everything is controlled and led only through the Koyach of HaKadosh Baruch. This is regarding the past Shabbos. How this week has a shaykhs to last week. However, we also know that Shabbos gives bracha into the days that come. And this week we will be celebrating Yud Beis Tammuz. And it is this Shabbos that gives bracha into Yud Beis Tammuz. So to a degree, this Shabbos has the koyach, has the strength and the power to give the bracha to Yud Beis Tammuz. So here the Rebbe again stressed how especially this year, it's a year of Hakel, it's a year of Tismach, Tesamach. What is the whole union of Hakel? The whole union of Hakel is also uniting all of Klal Yisrael, even though we find definitions amongst Yidden. Yidden are divided, the leaders and the heads, to the extent of those that chop the wood and carry the water. In other words, they're naturally by Yidden, there are various levels. And even the terminology which is used regarding Hakel is also Anoshim, Noshim, V'Tav. There's the division of Anoshim, there's the division of Noshim, and there's the division of Tav. But nonetheless, there's also the Melech who's reading the Parsha, who's reading the Hakel Parsha for all those that are present. And why do we say that Hakel unites all of these Yidden together? The Nasi, as mentioned earlier, the Nasi who Hakel, who is reading the Parsha, while he's reading the Parsha of Hakel, he's becoming united with all those who are participating in the Hakel. Maybe the stressing this is an opportune year to bring out the message of Yud Beis Tammuz. And again, stressing that this year, it's 60 years since we celebrate Yud Beis Tammuz. 60 years since we celebrate Yud Beis Tammuz, and 61 years since Yud Beis Tammuz actually happened. It was 1927, Tafresh Pei Zayin, that the Frierdiker Rebbe was released from prison. And when did Chassidim begin celebrating Yud Beis Tammuz, that it was arranged as a permanent yontiv? That was a year later, in the year of Tafresh Pei Ches. In fact, this famous letter which we're talking about, which the Rebbe always refers to, the letter how the Frierdiker Rebbe writes, Loi oisi bilvad goal HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that the inyan of Geula is something which has a shaykhs to Geula Yud Beis Tammuz, has a shaykhs to everyone. This is a letter which the Frierdiker Rebbe wrote 60 years ago to the celebration, to the first year that Yud Beis Tammuz was celebrated. In other words, a year after it really happened. Through a parallel here, we find regarding Hanukkah, the Gemara tells us the whole way how Hanukkah was celebrated. The Gemara tells us, Gemara Shabbos, Gemara tells us exactly what happened. Then the Gemara says, L'shana haba, when it came the next year, the 20th year later, that is when they set Hanukkah as a yontif. It wasn't arranged as a yontif the first year. When was it arranged as a yontif? The following year, when it came about to the date of Hanukkah, that is when the Chachamim have said that Hanukkah should be celebrated. Saying, when was Yud Beis Tammuz arranged as a permanent yontif. Shana haba, when it came the next year, 60 years ago, the year Tov Reish Pei Ches, that is when it was set to be a permanent yontif, to be celebrated by Yidden and by Chassidim throughout the world eternally. Fi Nitzchias. If I may, it has a shaykhs. There's a Chassidish vote which I heard many years ago. Why Take did they wait for next year to arrange Chanukah as a yontif? Mother says that they waited a year, and Shana Haba Kovum B'Halal V'Hidor. That is when they arrange that comes Chanukah. We have to say Halal and Al Anisim and celebrate Chanukah. The Yidden lived through such a miracle. The excitement was so great. Why did they have to wait for next year? That very year, the minute it happened, the day it happened, when they found the Pach Shemen, they were so thankful to the Rebishter. So the Yidden should have proclaimed that from here and after we're going to celebrate Chanukah. Why did they have to wait a year later? So it's brought the Chassidish Sforim. Interpretation is brought. What's the pshat in Yom Tov? Yom Tov is Stam. It's a day that we take a day on the calendar, and this is a day that we celebrate. The Yom Tov is the pshat that there's a certain Gilu Yalakus. There are certain Oiros. There's revelation of certain Getlichkeit on that given day. And every yontif has its ha'ora lekis, its special ha'ora, which is revealed in those days of that yontif. In fact, you'll notice, in Chassidus, the Rebbe always mentions, that comes every yontif. Chassidus stresses how this yontif is the greatest. What's the pshat? That there's a special oil, there's a specialty to every yontif, which no other yontif taka has. So from a certain angle, every yontif is taka the greatest. Chanukah, Purim has its inyan, Rosh Hashanah has its inyan, Chukas has its inyan, Shavuos has its inyan, and so forth. A yontif, when the Yidden lived through the first Chanukah, they did not know what's going to happen next year. Will there be, again, this revelation of Getlichkeit, which was here on this first Chanukah, or wouldn't there be? L'shana haba, when the Chachamim saw that this Gilui Lakus, which Chanukah is supposed to call for, bring out, is here again. So they said, Oy bazoi, if so, time has come that we can go ahead and set it for a permanent yom. Same thing. Yud Beis Tammuz, it's a tremendous day. It's a day of tremendous nesinas koyach. It's a day of koyches. And Chassidim are given, Yidden are given to utilize this day. The Rebbe always keeps on stressing how we have to take an example. Take from the Frierdiker Rebbe, take from the Baal HaSimcha V'Agula, from his attitude. Frierdiker Rebbe literally sacrificed his life. And what for? For the upkeep of Yiddishkeit. So how much of a Kal V'Choyim of them, Benoishal Kal V'Choyim, is it to us now? Baruch Hashem, it does not involve Mesiras Nefesh. Nobody's going to be arrested for spreading Yiddishkeit in the country which we live in these countries. So how much more so should we dedicate our lives to spreading of Torah and Yiddishkeit? So the taich is that this is a Yom Mesugol. This is a special day. There's a special Ha'ora Lekis. This day gives special koiches that we should be able to fulfill the message of Yud Beis Tammuz. Memela, that's the pshat. It came next year. The Rebbe is saying it's compared to Chanukah. It came next Takazoi, because when it came next year, and the same Ha'ora Lekis, the same Getlachkeit was revealed on this specific day, that is when it was set and arranged to be a permanent yontif to be celebrated La'ad L'Oil Meilon. As far as today's Seder, the Rebbe continues, Seder is Pashas Chukas. What is the meaning of Chukas? So Chassidus teaches, and the Alter Rebbe explains in Lekutei Torah, which is the Rebbe refers to Lekutei Torah, the Chassidish Seder. The Alter Rebbe explains what is the meaning of Chukas, Moloshen Chakika, Moloshen engraving. What's the Taich engraving? What is the difference between writing and engraving? The difference is very obvious. When something is written with a pen and pencil, or with ink, then the letter is one thing, and the paper or the parchment or whatever it was written on is another Metzius, is something else. What could happen? The letters can fade and can be erased from the paper. What is the taich when something is engraved? When letters are engraved, the letters can never be erased from the stone or from any other object what they were engraved on. What is the taich? Zois Chukas HaTorah. The attitude of a Yid to Torah has to be in the same way. A Yid has to feel that he is totally united with Torah. He's united with Torah to such an extent that nothing can part between him and Torah. Just like Oisi Yisachkika. And that is the whole union of Zois Chukas HaTorah. Here the Rebbe says it's appropriate to also refer to the Rashi in this week's Seder. And the Rebbe recently, the Farbrengen refers to the first Rashi of the Seder. What does Rashi say? Lefi shehasoten v'umas ha'olam meinen es Yisrael, the Soten and the Goyim criticize the Yidden. Ma mitzvah zois? What kind of mitzvah is this? Ma tam yesh bo? What kind of reason is there? Lefikach kosov b'chuka. That is why the Torah used the expression chuk. Choik. Choik means it's a commandment. There's no reason for it. Gzeira himel fonai. The Rebbe says it's a gzeira from him. Ein lecha reshus laharech. You are not permitted to give any second thoughts why I've told you to do that. Do it as a command, as a decree. This says even though when Farbrengen's already explained this Rashi and it's already printed, but nonetheless there is a point which wasn't touched yet. What is the Lashon in Rashi? Lefi v'umas ha'olam. How does the Soten come in here? The Soten and umas ha'olam, they are the ones that criticize the Yid. Rashi could have. What's in the here? The Soten. Rebbe is bringing out that the source of the Taina is the Soten Taki. Who's the one that's creating the Taina? How come Yidden are Mekayim these mitzvahs of Chukim? Who's the one that originates this Taina? The originator of this Taina is the Soten. From the Soten, it is already channeled into umas ha'olam. Because l'chayra umas ha'olam on their own wouldn't have criticized Yidden. It's because that the Soten arouses it and leads to it. The Soten kind of like instigates the umas ha'olam. That's why this is the Seder in Rashi also this way. First Soten and then umas ha'olam. The Soten kind of instigates the umas ha'olam that they should raise the question to the Yidden. And what do they ask? Ma tam yeshba, ma mitzvah zois, what kind of mitzvah is this? Or ma tam yeshba. In other words, Taina is like this. I was explaining what is the Taina. What is the criticism on the Chukah? Criticism on the Chukah is very obvious, very simple. They're taining, you Yidden are so smart, you Yidden are so intelligent, you Yidden are called an Am Chocham V'Nodain, an intelligent a nation of Chochmah and Bina. So how is it suitable for you people to go ahead and do things that you don't understand? That you Yidden are doing in Yonam of Chayk that has no reason. So what is the explanation for it? The explanation for it is because Yidden do it as a mitzvah. What's the pshat a mitzvah? A mitzvah, Chassidus teaches, stems from the word attachment. A Yid does it because a Yid wants to be attached to the Eibishter. We see it in Gashmias. A child wants to be attached to his parents. The same, a Yid wants to be attached to the Eibishter. So when a Yid wants to be attached to the Eibishter, it's a mitzvah hazois, it's this mitzvah. He doesn't care whether he understands or he doesn't understand, or he has a reason for it, he doesn't have a reason for it. This drive of the Yid is to be attached to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And based on that, he knows that how can he be attached to HaKadosh Baruch Hu? That is through doing mitzvahs. Memele, Yid is fulfilling ha mitzvah hazois because it is through this mitzvah he has his attachment to the Rebbe. Here in the Farbrengen, the Rebbe urged very strongly to make Yud-based Tamis Farbrengens. The days in the following week, Yud-based Tamis should be utilized properly. try to make as many as Yud Beis Tammuz Farbrengens as possible. I reach out to as many Yidden as possible that they should participate in the Farbrengens of Yud Beis Tammuz. The Rebbe says, though, kind of like he was referring to himself, the Farbrengen here will not be, use the expression, will not be with the usual trask. It's a Yiddish word, in other words, usual force. But it usually is because he himself will be on the Oyel on Monday. In other words, it seems like the Rebbe will not Farbrengen. There will not be a Farbrengen Monday night for Yud Beis Tammuz. The Rebbe may speak if they come in his house after he comes back from the Yale, but after Meirah, but as far as the Farbrengen, the Rebbe says there will not be. But nonetheless, he's urging everybody to really utilize the days of Yud Beis Tammuz properly and bring this message how it has a shaykhus to every Yid and as many Farbrengens as possible. Here the Rebbe went into another inyan, again explaining the Mishnah and Pirkei Avos in today's Mishnah. Today is the fifth Perek. Fifth Perek brings out the specialty of number 10, beginning with Asora Mamoris Nivra Olam, how the world was created with the 10 quotations of the Rebishter, continuing into the 10 miracles which took place in the Beis HaMikdash, all in a number of 10. Als the Indian of 10. And afterwards, after the 10 nisim that have taken place in the Beis HaMikdash, there are other inyanim also als that deal with the number of 10. What is number 10? So let us look at it in a group of people, a group of people. So every one more person that we have for any inyan adds and increases to the concept of Beroiv Am Hadras Melech. An expression that the more that participate, Beroiv Am, it's more hadar, it's more beauty, more glory for a melech. This is regarding any mitzvah and so forth, any initial mitzvah. So if there's 5 opposed to 4, it adds in the Beroiv Am Hadras Melech. 6 as opposed to 5 adds yet more. However, when we come to number 10, from 9 to 10, not only is it a difference in 1, that 10 is 1 more than 9, but when we're talking 10 as opposed to 9, 10 it becomes a Metzius Chadosha. It becomes it's a new group, it's a new inyan. From 1 through 9, every one more is taken increase. However, when it changes from 9 to 10, here we have a concept of a minyan. Here we have an Eidah, a congregation. This is something which changes when we enter number 10. So what is the inyan of Esa? Esa really is a Metzias Chadosha. Kind of like a new creation, a new being. That happens through number 10. In other words, even as the numbers itself, it's also that way. 1 through 10, 1 through 9, each number is an increase on the other. Comes to number 10, here we begin a new type of counting. Same even when it comes to 100 and it comes to 1,000, it's also that way. It's 10 is a multiple, we're going into a new way of counting. As in hundreds, we are going in to a new figure. Until now we've been in tens. Now we're going into such type of a number, which is again a Metzias Chadasha. So one is really the inyan of Eser, Asara. Asara accomplishes a new Metzias. This is regarding Bichas HaMazon. We also find in Halacha that there are differences, the way we bench. So by 3, once we have 3 people, we bench with a mezuzah. We have between 3 and 10, up to 10 rather, it is still mezuzah. It comes to 10, it changes. In Gemara we find it's not la halacha, but in Gemara we find an opinion of Tanoim that even by other numbers, as the numbers keep increasing from 100 to 1,000 and to 10,000 and so forth, the text of Bichas HaMazon should change. So again, when is the opinion of the Tana that holds that the text change? It's when we go in to a new cycle of number, into a new Metzias. So this corresponds also to the Zohar in this week's Sedra. There's a Zohar in this week's Sedra where one Tana said to the other, I think it's Rav Shimon ben Yochai, he asked him to say a milsach hadeten, say something new. Say in Torah a milsach hadeten, a new in. Corresponds the same idea to the Indian of Eser. Eser is also the Taich we're going into a new Indian. Other brought out, mentioned, we're talking about this Indian, he mentioned that there's we know that there are various Aleph Beis. We are used to Aleph Beis Gimel Dalet. For example, there's an Aleph Beis of Atbash, take the first letter and the last letter. There's an Aleph Beis of Ayak Bechar. Ayak Bechar would mean, I think it's, we make a kind of like a tic-tac-toe box. And we write 9 boxes. So we go Aleph Beis Gimel Dalet Hey Vav Zayin Ches Tet. Then to begin again, we begin with the Yud. The Yud comes out to be in the first box next to the Aleph. And then we go again, Beis, Chof next to Beis, Lamet, Mem, and so forth. Nun, Samach, Ayin, Hey, Tzadik. So to begin again, when we come back to the first box, we come back with Kuf. So it reads, Aleph Yud Kuf, Ayak, Bechar, Beis Chof Reish, Gimel Lamet Shin, Daled Mem Sof, and so forth. And you'll notice, how does this Aleph Beis begin? It begins with Ayak, Aleph Yud Kuf. Aleph Yud Kuf, this corresponds to what we just now discussed. Aleph, Yud, and Kuf are each letters, kind of like it becomes a new Metzias by each one of them. Aleph is the first. Then when we come into Yud, which is 10, thank you. We come into 10, which is, as we just now discussed, again into a new cycle of numbers. And then we go into Kuf. The Rebbe even mentioned when we go over to 1,000, 1,000 is called Elef. What's the Taich Elef? Elef has the Aleph in it. What does the Aleph remind us? The Aleph always reminds us on the Aleph Shalom, on the Rabbeinu Shalom. So here the Rebbe is bringing out, he's mekasher, he's tying together the milsa chadete, which the Zohar is talking about, the new, where one Tane asks the other to say a new inyan in Torah. And he's tying this together to Ba'asara Ma'amoris Nivra Elam, that Asara is also an inyan of a milsa chadete. We're entering a new cycle of numbers. The Rebbe is feeling goes in Avodah, the Rachayit in Elibe. What does this mean for us? The Rebbe is urging to make the Yud Beis Tammuz Farbrengens, make as many as possible, and how many places as possible, and have everyone participate. But it would be appropriate that the Yud Beis Tammuz Farbrengens to utilize it for a milsa chadete. Naturally, what's the whole inyan of a Farbrengen? The whole inyan of a Farbrengen is to bring out Poyol Mamish, to bring out good results, which should come as an outcome of a Chassidische Farbrengen. However, Rebbe is requesting that we should see to it that the result should be also in an area of a milsa chadete. We should accept upon ourselves something new, a new type of an inyan which we haven't been doing till now. An inyan which we weren't involved in till now, we should accept upon ourselves effective this Yud Beis Tammuz. And the Rebbe kept on stressing it throughout the end of the Farbrengen, this inyan of milsa chadete, something new. The Zohar there is talking about Rav Shimon ben Yochai and his son Rabbi Eliezer, who they themselves, the Rebbe is saying, with their greatness we know from the expression of Rav Shimon ben Yochai himself. What did he say? He was talking about B'nei Aliyah. B'nei Aliyah means the special people in the world. People that have Aliyah, their own spiritual uplifting. So what did Rav Shimon ben Yochai say? He was referring to them, that if there are only 2 people in the world that can be defined as B'nei Aliyah, it is his son Rabbi Eliezer and himself. If there's only one that can be defined that way, then it's only him. So we imagine whom we're talking about. And in this week's Zohar it is discussed the Milsa Chadata, which was asked to be revealed in Torah. So this is appropriate, but the whole inyan of Yud Beis Tammuz should be celebrated properly. And again, the Rebbe kept on stressing how important it is to try and make as many Farbrengen as possible, and it should be suitable times and desirable times so that people should be able to participate and make more and more Farbrengens for Yud Beis Tammuz. But the outcome of the Yud Beis Tammuz Farbrengen should also be an Milsa Chadata and an acceptance of something new. But they referred this in the Chassidus of the Mittel Rebbe. It is discussed the inyan of his boineness. When a person, an individual, thinks into specific inyan. The Mittel Rebbe explains that there's a concept of a hisboinenus klolis. A person thinks, and he thinks very general. Mittel Rebbe brings out that this is not sufficient. Why? Because from a general hisboinenus, this will not lead to a poil mamish in a specific inyan. What is needed is, in addition to the hisboinenus klolis, there's also need for a hisboinenus protes. Person can take a think very great things in Yud Beis Tammuz and how this has to affect him, and can think about it in very general terms, in a very broad and general term. However, this is not sufficient. There has to be the touch of the hisboinenus proti, how he has to tie it together, how it has a specific shaychus to a specific inyan, to him, to a specific inyan which will be brought down into poil mamish, into ma'aseh b'poil. The end of the Farbrengen, Rebbe said that we are used to an expression which the Rebbe uses very often, especially when he still learned the Rashis and raised many questions in Rashi. The Rebbe would have an expression, a klotz kasha. What's a klotz kasha? A klotz is a beam. Beam in Yiddish means a klotz. A klotz kasha means a kasha. You have a question which is so strong, you can't move it like you can't budge, you can't move a beam. That would be a very, very strong and obvious question, very outstanding question, would usually be referred to as a klotz kasha. Rebbe says he's going to use a similar expression. He says we are in a Farbrengen today, which is taking place on Yud Tammuz. Today, Shabbos is 10 days in Tammuz. And we know that we have the Tilim, which we say daily, the Yom Tilim. So on 10 days in the month, we all say the Kapitlach, beginning from Kapitel Nun Hey, which is Yom Yud for the month. Rebbe says when it comes to say Tilim, everyone is equal. Because how do we say in the Yiratzim from Tilim? We say that our Tilim should be accepted just like David HaMelech saying it. In comparison to David HaMelech, it is Kakot and Kagodl. Anyone who, how great one may be, we still realize the distance between him and David HaMelech. So everybody's really equal when it comes to say Tilim. And we all said the Yom Tilim today. So now we are on the Farbrengen. We're already at the end of the Farbrengen. And the Rebbe says, everybody's looking on the clock, ready wanting for the Farbrengen to be over, waiting for Kriyas HaTorah of Mincha, and after that we'll be able to have Shalashudas, and after Shalashudas we'll be able to go for a rest. But the question which he has is, as he used the expression as he posed, a klotz nigun. He says many nigunim were sung already in the Farbrengen. However, in today's Yom of Tilim, there's a nigun which has a shaychus, also has a shaychus to the inyan of Gula. In Kapitel Nun Hey, we have the nigun that begins Pada B'Shalom Nafshi. And why many nigunim were sung in the Farbrengen, and why wasn't this nigun sung yet? And right after the Rebbe said it, the Rebbe himself began singing Pada B'Shalom Nafshi. Afterwards, the Rebbe said to sing, there's a nigun, it's called the Beinani. Chlal by the Farbrengens, it happens Shoshanim always, and sometimes in other Farbrengens, there's a nigun which has a specific shaychus to each and every one of the Rabbeim. Beginning from the Alter Rebbe's nigun, there's a special nigun for the Mittel Rebbe, and so forth. Obviously, these nigunim were nigunim which every specific Rebbe would express a kind of a chavivis to us, extra kind of an admiration to this specific nigun. By the Friedeke Rebbe, there's a nigun which is called the Beinani. It's a very chassidische Harzike nigun. So right afterwards, the Rebbe also said that the nigun of the Beinani should be sung. And the Rebbe was already, before finishing the Farbrengen, the Rebbe said L'chaim a few times. He said it would be appropriate, halavai, mimenu yiru v'chein yasu, that everybody should copy what he just did. In other words, he just said L'chaim. The Rebbe asked everyone also to say L'chaim. Then the Rebbe reminded for the bracha achreina.
It happens that the gematria for Lev is 32. Now, 8 times 32 is 256, which shows that Aaron was beyond nature in terms of his Abbas Yisrael.
Okay.
I think what's the relation with the Yod?
Yeah. Each and every one of these ICs, these are kind of new numbers.
Oh,
Aleph, 1, 10, and 100. Each one introduced.
And with Aleph.
Aleph is also. Aleph is 1,000.
Right,
So it's taken out here in the Aleph base, but Aleph also reminds us Melashon Aleph. Aleph, I remind Aleph Shalom and the Rabbinish Shalom. It's out how a new union is created, going into a new Metzias.
Connected with something new, Aleph.
That's right. Aleph is again you're going into a new cycle. You're adding on a new digit, and it's a new way of coming to. It's a new number.
About the point of Ne'ali, I don't know Yiddish, but I heard guys saying Ne'ali that they are malim the olam with them, they are malim the whole olam as it's in its level to the much more higher level. What was the connection?
It has a connection to the Zayir, being that the Zayir is Reb Shimon ben Yochai, so talking about Reb Shimon ben Yochai, the Rebbe got into this union as well. Okay, I got a so what's